Hi, everybody. Welcome to the St. Pete Soul podcast. I am your host, Brittany Renew, and today I am excited to have Phillip Ingram here with me. He is the owner of Lonni Sandwiches in downtown St. Pete, which is an amazing staple in the community. Hi, Phillip. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Brittany. Thank you so much for having me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I've been there, I've eaten there several times, whether in the shop or like catered at events, and it's always awesome quality and friendly atmosphere, which is amazing. And also just knowing you're so involved with our local chamber, whether it's the St. Pete Young Professionals or the Greater Chamber. So just appreciate you and like your service to the community.
So thank you.
Yeah. Well, welcome on. And I would love just to kind of dive in and hear more about you and your background.
Okay. So a little bit about me. I call myself a Florida native. It's not 100% accurate. I'm originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia, but
Okay, we won't hold that against you.
Thank you. So I got into Florida right when I was tail end of elementary school. Pensacola is what I consider my hometown. I grew up most of my life there. Through work, I have lived in just about every major market in the state of Florida, or worked in every major market in the state of Florida. St. Pete would have been included in that when I used to travel for work. And that is kind of why I chose to end up back here, because it was my favorite out of all the places that I was. So a little bit about my background is I worked in large corporate restaurants for a little over 10 years. I did a lot of new openings with them. I, in essence, would travel to either troubled locations in certain brands or go to a new opening, whether it be in the Tampa market or Pinellas Park, Orlando, Daytona, etc.
Okay.
And then I ended up making my way here right before COVID took off.
Great timing.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was that like? Did you already have like friends and family that lived here before that?
So no, it was I won't lie, it was a little scary. I began training for a local company here that I was really excited to become a part of. That was on a growth trajectory at the time. And obviously you're not opening new restaurants during the heat of COVID. Probably 2 weeks before I moved here, I actually was furloughed, and I moved here without a job. So it was kind of one of those moments of where I knew that I wanted to be in St. Pete. I had wanted to be here for quite a while, and the opportunity prior to that had presented itself, and I just kind of took a deep breath and decided that I was going one way or another.
Wow. Yeah, that takes a lot of bravery there, I think.
There's a lot
faith.
of sleepless nights to start.
Yeah. So you didn't really have any connections here when you moved here besides that initial job, obviously that changed.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's funny because so I think we talked about this before. I'm from Mobile, Alabama originally. So just that, Pensacola, not far away. So a little bit of that connection there. And then my husband and I also moved here for a job opportunity for him without knowing anyone. So I feel like we're kindred spirits in our journey to St. Pete there.
It's the Gulf Coast connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So gosh, how did you end up owning one of like the staples of St. Pete with Lonnie's sandwiches? Where did that opportunity come from?
Just, a crazy amount of random series of events. But so prior to moving here, for a while I've been in food for a little under 2 decades now. I have been wanting to open up my own brand for a while, have my own restaurant of mine. And so I had begun exploring prior to living in St. Petersburg. I was actually in Fort Lauderdale. And I had begun exploring the process of doing my own thing. Some things just didn't work out. And then I was actually, once I moved here, I developed a couple of my own concepts, my own brands. And one of them was a gourmet sandwich shop. And so I'd been looking at some other shells, like empty things, and I'm just looking at stuff that's on the market too. And lo and behold, I found a sandwich shop posted online that was for sale, and I looked at the listing, and I kind of was able to figure out that it was Lonnie's, and I had been to Lonnie's like a number of times. I knew the quality was great. I knew that it had been in the community for a long time, and that it was just something that St. Pete really embraced and enjoyed. Because, it was still in the middle of COVID, I felt a little bit more relaxed to purchase a known quantity than perhaps start a unknown quantity, right? So I just wanted to acquire something that was great in the community and hopefully keep it going and perhaps even make it better. And that's really what my goal has been to be able to do, is to preserve a community staple. And we turned 35 years this old, which is awesome. And my goal is to keep it preserved for another 35 years.
Yeah. It's a legacy. It's just carrying on. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So talk about like what are the challenges with trying to keep up a legacy like that when you're just kind of jumping in the middle of it? Like that's what's coming up for me as you're talking about that.
So my number one concern is always don't screw it up. So there are things that have to change in every business, whether it's food, housing. The Mustang with Ford is still around, but the Mustang does not look like it did 30, 40 years ago. You have to
It's a good analogy.
You have to update, you have to change. So it's a fine line. I don't want to change the core ever of what Lonnie's is or what it's known for. There are some things that you have to make minor adjustments for based off what's going on in the market, what is product availability, and the dynamics of the surrounding business. So that's always my number one fear, is I don't want someone who's been coming here for 20, 30 plus years to tell me that I screwed it up. That's the last thing I want. So I'm very cognizant of what made this brand great, and I want to keep it that way and hopefully just make some small tweaks and make it better.
Yeah. Well, so I'm curious, like, you came from like the corporate background in the restaurant industry with opening up these larger chains, I guess it sounds like. That's obviously such a different world than a small business, a small local sandwich shop. Like how have you kind of like used skills from that and then had to kind of change and adapt to a small shop?
So the cool thing is when you work for those large companies, they've become that large for a reason. And the great thing about them is they usually have pretty good systems. So I've been able to incorporate a lot of systems that help even in a small business, even though it's on a much smaller scale. you can apply some of those great things that you learned from those large companies into a smaller company
Yep.
such as this. And then I also do have a little bit of experience with some mom and pop restaurants that I was a general manager of. And I've been able to incorporate some things from that. So everywhere that I've worked, I've been able to take a little nugget and help ball it all into one, and hopefully help this business here. So it's funny you asked me how I guess end up in St. Pete. One of the things that I do love is about St. Pete is the climate that it has with its small business community.
Yeah, for sure.
So I obviously prefer small business. I enjoy, kind of the people aspect of the food business more than anything. And when you're in a little bit of a smaller realm, it's easier to make those connections. So that was part of the reason that I really was like, St. Pete is for me, because I knew eventually this is what I wanted to do. And I thought that St. Pete and the Tampa Bay area was one of the best small business markets in the state.
That's really cool. Well, and I feel like that's a theme that I've heard from so many business owners and just people that live here and enjoy the small businesses for sure. I mean, which is why I started this podcast. I mean, we have a great small business community. So, and you're adding on to that legacy. So that's really cool.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
It's the community that keeps us going. So very appreciative to them. Obviously we had a lot of support through COVID. Obviously not the easiest time to run a business, and even just this past week through Hurricane Ian, we've been out of a lot of stuff. My menu hasn't necessarily been intact because of supply chains, but everyone's been really understanding. Obviously, it could have been a lot worse for all of us here. But just to have that understanding and support from the local community has been really impressive, and we're really appreciative of it.
Yeah. Well, would you say that's why, excuse me, that's why you love the food industry so much, is that people aspect, that community aspect, or is there maybe something else?
So I've always enjoyed being in food. I grew up in the kitchen, on the kitchen side of things and operations. That's kind of my bread and butter. So I like being in the food. I like tinkering with food. But really, when I had my kind of aha moment of what I knew I was going to do this for the rest of my life was really when I started making connections with guests years ago. And just a quick story, I had my first restaurant that I ever worked in. I had the same plate that got ordered, I think, every Friday morning, and it had a lot of modifications on it. So it was not the easiest plate to make. And I made it probably 10 or 15 times. And I finally just told myself, I was like, I have to meet the person that keeps ordering this every Friday. And it was this older lady who came in. She had lost her husband the prior year, and that restaurant was the place they always went out on their dates. And so every Friday after that, she came in. I made her food. I usually walked it out, and probably my bosses didn't appreciate it, but I usually sat down with her for 10, 12 minutes after I brought her food and just talked with her. And that was kind of like that aha moment for me of how special a connection you can make or an experience you can make for a person through food.
Wow. That's a really cool story. I mean, you just made her, you made her day every day you did that, I'm sure. I mean, that's making an impact in someone's life. So that's amazing. What a cool story.
So,
And I mean,
it's really
I'm sure
cool,
you may have, you may have other stories like that, and as you continue to do that, that's really cool.
Yep. It's cool if you think about it. Restaurant operators have the opportunity to make, birthdays great or anniversaries great. If it's family that hasn't gotten together in years, we truly do provide experiences. For me specifically at Lonnie's, hopefully that I just provided you a great lunch, so the second half of your workday isn't as bad. So,
Yeah,
or I
for
can make a
sure.
great office, or I can make a great office retreat go well, or um, anything in that. So it's just I look at it from, yes, we do serve food. That's how we make our money, but we're also providing experiences amongst people and memories, really.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that ties in really well to how involved you've been with the chamber, um, with the St. Young professionals and then the larger chamber. It sounds like you're passionate about that community aspect of it.
Certainly. So I've always wanted to really be able to get involved with the community. Prior to moving here, I was on the road constantly. I moved a
Mm,
lot based off what market I was working in. So that was the one negative prior, that I wasn't able to connect the way that I wanted to in the community that I was in. So now, for better or worse, St. Pete is stuck with me. So so it has been a goal of mine to get involved in the community where I can and help make connections and give back where I can too.
yeah, you're finally putting down roots, in your adult life. It sounds like it had been a long journey. So that's awesome.
Yep. Hope so. That's the
Have you
plan.
been able, yeah, have you been able to convince anyone else to move here since you've lived here?
So yes, I have a number of people. Especially those friends living in the Northeast. I mean, we've all seen just the flood of them coming down. So
Yeah.
a few of those. My next big target is to convince my mom to get down here too. So I think I'm working on that one pretty good. I think I've got her in the next few years. So
Awesome. Well, fingers crossed. I know that'd be special for you.
definitely.
Well, so okay, so you mentioned being like in the kitchen on the operation side. Is that something where like would you consider yourself a chef where like you enjoy thinking of new recipes, or like how does that like what is that like for you and how does that play in with Lonnie's?
So I actually get this question a lot. I do not consider myself a chef, just because
Okay.
I have worked with a lot of formally trained chefs, and I don't call myself a chef because I feel like I'm disrespecting them because they do have a lot more knowledge generally. I tinker with food, I play with food, I have fun with food and menus. I'm much more of an operational guy. Um,
Hmm.
so I can tell you a lot about systems and how to make things run more efficiently. Um,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't consider myself like classical chef.
So like more with like, all right, how many people you need to have in the kitchen, what those roles are, and then the systems and stuff like that. That's kind of what you're talking about.
Certainly, do we need to move a cooler in a different place because will it allow you to make things quicker? Or
Hmm.
will this being placed here make the guest experience better? So
Yeah.
let's say restaurateur and maybe not chef.
Okay, that's fair. Have you added like any new things to the menu since you opened it, or well, since you took it on?
Yes, so we've had some deletions and we've had some additions. Again, going back to saying, hey, I don't want to mess this up. I am very I put a lot of thought into menu changes here, just because a lot of customers have been coming here for so long. So we've
Hmm.
probably changed about 10 to 15% of the menu. Some of it's been some really good additions that have been really popular. Some things we've added just to provide a little bit more variety. Some things we've had to delete because of the price of some items. We had one sandwich, for instance, that I had to get rid of because two of the ingredients on the sandwich were import products. And the price of both those items went up almost over between 70 and 90%. So
Wow.
I wanna keep all my prices at what I would consider a fair value price. So in order to do that, unfortunately, sometimes you have to make tough choices. But I think that most of the changes that we've made, the guests have been very receptive to. One of our hot sandwiches that we added, we named it after the street that we're on. It's called the Central, and it's actually now our top-selling hot sandwich.
Nice. What's your favorite thing on the menu?
Oh my gosh, it's got to be the Sunny Bird. It's got to be the Sunny Bird. Everyone comes for the Sunny Bird. So
that's a good one.
That is, I guess, what we would consider the OG Lonnie's favorite. It's not going anywhere, and I mean, it's a funky concoction of things that you would throw on a sandwich, but it's awesome. It works, and the bread. So we have the wild rice bread, which is our proprietary bread. We actually do import a specific rice grain down from Minnesota, cook it in house, and then cook it into our bread. And I think that in a big way is what makes us us.
Yeah, it's a different. Oh, anyway, it makes you guys different. I can't get the word out, but well, I would love to hear, like, how does it work with food costs? That's something, you hear, if you're watching a food, television show, you hear food costs a lot. What is that process like for you? Controlling the food.
I usually analyze food cost and product items maybe monthly. Food cost has been all over the board this year with everything with inflation. It's nothing that we haven't all seen in the news. So I've had to manage it a little bit closer than you typically would in a normal year. But we're doing the best that we can. We unfortunately have had to raise prices a little bit. But we're also making a little less per sandwich because I'm not going to pass on the full cost of what we've had to endure from a purchase perspective onto our guest. So you got to be smart about it. You've got to meet in the middle. You don't want to just send it all to the consumer and just hope that it comes down a little bit at some point.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. I mean, it's all cyclical, so it'll eventually work itself out, I think. Hopefully.
It will.
So and I'd love to ask, and we kind of talked about this, but what would be your favorite thing? What's your favorite thing about owning this business?
Really, my favorite thing about owning this business is specifically Lonnie's is it has so many core regular customers. So it's really, I feel like a lot of days when I'm here, I'm talking with a big group of friends. It's people that I see 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a week. I just really enjoy conversations with them. My team members, 3 of them have been here over 5 years and 2 of them have been here over 10 years. So seeing the interaction between the customers and them who have known each other for a long time, it's just a special special shop that we have here that it would be hard to recreate. So
Yeah.
it's really cool just to see just the relationships. I would say is probably my favorite part. Especially where we're located in downtown. I mean, you meet and you talk and serve a lot of people that are very ingrained in the St. Pete community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you're definitely in the heart of downtown, like where everyone is walking around, coming from work, stopping for lunch. So, yeah. Well, so I like to ask this question, and it may be a similar answer, but like, what would you say your why is? Like, what motivates you to get out of bed every morning?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be part of it, certainly the people, but also I think anyone that has kind of that entrepreneurial mindset they're always waking up like ready to go build whatever it
Yeah.
is, how can I build this, how can I make it better, um, so that's part of it. And then I think about what eventually I want to provide for a future family and hopefully have that set up. And so that's part of it too. I want something to be built that can be proud of and that is established that the community loves, but also takes care of myself and my family in the future.
Yeah. I mean, you took the legacy that Lonnie's has been in the community, and you kind of carried the torch, and being able to continue to do that long term for the legacy of your family. So that's really neat. Yeah. So what would be like how what would be some like future goals? Like what's that long term vision that you see for the business?
So my long term goal is to obviously have Lonnie's around as long as people will have it. My goal is to hopefully at some point have a number of brands under my umbrella, kind of a restaurant portfolio. But
Mm-hmm.
Lonnie's has really shifted my mindset into I would like to target acquiring long-standing, what I would call legacy brands in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So can I find other Lonnies that have been around for a while that the community loves and say
Yep.
say that there's a restaurant operator owner that, you know, is getting a little bit older and they want to retire and they don't have any kids to leave this restaurant to. Um, I would like to be able to continue that legacy. So that's kind of my mindset over the next 10 years is to look to acquire maybe a portfolio of restaurants that really compound what we've done here is taking a great local brand, strengthening it, and hopefully keeping it around as a great local small business brand that the community loves.
That's cool. I mean, I don't think I've interviewed lots of different business owners. I don't think anyone's really shared that answer yet. So that's cool to hear you say like wanting to take those local brands and carry that legacy that they built, and maybe they aren't able to leave it to a family member, and you're able to come in there and do the same thing that you've done with Lonnie's and build that as a portfolio. That's really cool because it continues to like help that small business community in St. Pete. It keeps that alive because I know, the city's growing a lot and we all see that. And I think there's a little bit of a fear there that we'll lose some of these small business, touches. And,
Yep.
you like being mindful of that. That's really cool to kind of keep that legacy alive.
Yep. So it's definitely going to be challenges with growth in the community. I mean, certainly from a business perspective, like we're happy to have growth in our community. But you're right. I do think about, these small businesses and shops are the ones that add the character to what our city is. Um,
Mhm.
I know a lot of, small business owners in this community, and I just think about going up and down Central Avenue a lot. And would Central Avenue have the same feel if it was all national brands of restaurants and shops that were in place? I would argue probably not. And so that's kind of why, and I enjoy that about St. Pete, that it does have that local feel when you come here. So that's kind of why I've retooled my mind of that's the legacy that I want to leave, is keeping that small business spirit strong, and the identity of St. Pete, while growing, still sticks to its core.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. It really is. But I think, like you, if we're mindful of that, then we can achieve that working together. So very cool. Well, so I'd love to hear, like, what's a typical day look like for you?
A must is we have to start off with a coffee. So,
Yes,
so
for sure.
definitely a coffee morning, and then it's jumping into action. We're making phone calls, either to vendors, staff to check on what's going on, um, and just getting ready for the rush for lunch. We're we do one meal a day, so we got to do it right. So just
Yeah.
getting everything prepared for that, getting ready to have a line out the door for an hour, hour and a half, and we break down, set up for the next day. So, but really, it's uh, aside from that, making sure that I have a young lab that I got to make sure he's taken care of too. Um,
Yep.
so, but yeah, so that's it. If I'm not at work, I usually am somewhere out and about downtown, um, whether it's at one of our great restaurants, or just hanging out on the waterfront, because I think we have one of the best downtown waterfronts in the nation.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. We have so much, like, public access on the waterfront, which is rare. So that makes it cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, all right. So I got a few, like, hot seat questions to end the conversation with. So just like your first thought. So
Okay.
what's your favorite spot? Yeah. So what's your favorite spot to go to for a night out?
Okay. I'm gonna give you three because I can't give you one.
Okay, that's fine.
So Savignon, Gra-
Oh, so good.
Grazie's,
Awesome.
or Bow and Mo's.
Three wonderful choices. So you can't pick between those. I
It's
agree.
just what you're in the mood for.
Yeah, for sure. All right. What about your favorite pizza?
I'll go with Oak and Stone.
Okay. I always get so many different answers with that one, so that's cool. All right. So when you get a day off, what's your favorite thing to do?
Just I guess hanging out with my pup. Really, I just anything outside. If it's great weather, I want to be outside. So
Yeah.
whether it's going to the beach, whether it's being downtown, um, obviously doing a lot of networking events as we've discussed. So I try to
Hmm.
stay pretty active, even on days off.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me. And I feel like you peeled back the curtain. We learned a lot about you and about, like, how you're carrying that legacy for Lonnie's in and caring for the small business community here, which I commend you for. It's really awesome. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Brittany. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, and before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find you online. Where the shop's located, all that good stuff.
Okay. We are at 429 Central Avenue, right in between 4th and 5th Street. You will see the giant building 400 Central being right across the street from us, so it's hard to miss. You can
Yeah.
find us online at Lonnie's Downtown St. Pete.com, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. All right, Phillip. Well, thank you again. We'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.